As French authorities prepare to dismantle Calais' infamous migrant camp, activists stage protests and aid workers accuse France and Britain of failing more than 1,300 unaccompanied children. While Iraqi forces and their allies gradually close in on the insurgent-held city of Mosul, Turkey says it responded to a Peshmerga request for assistance, despite Baghdad ruling out Ankara's involvement. And the US Senate Subcommittee on Antitrust says it will hold a hearing on AT&T's planned acquisition of Time Warner for $85.4 billion. The move has raised concerns among US lawmakers. Hello, I'm Nadia Sharbi. Thank you for watching France 24. At 8 a.m. this Monday, French authorities will begin dismantling Calais' makeshift migrant camp, a squalid shantytown dubbed the Jungle. The operation is expected to take a week, and around 7,000 people will be dispatched by coach to the 450 welcome centres set up across the country. Well, on the eve of the operation, officials handed out flyers in several languages, notifying migrants of the camp's imminent closure and urging them to give up on their dreams of reaching Britain. As tense negotiations continue, the UK has only agreed to take in a handful of unaccompanied minors. With just hours to go, Home Office officials have been racing to process eligible young people. Meanwhile, activists are voicing serious concern for the migrants' welfare and safety. Here are a few reactions from migrants preparing to leave the camp.
And I'm ready for leave this jungle because this jungle is not good for us, for our life here.
We don't have any other choice but to leave because people will dismantle the camp. We trust the French government will resettle us in good centres, but we're also a little worried.
Well, our reporter Catherine Norris-Trent sends us this from Calais.
French authorities have made extensive preparations for the demolition of the Jungle, this huge migrant camp here in Calais. Just before first light this Monday, at around 8 a.m. local time, police officers are going to move in, equipped with riot gear, moving migrants out of the camp. Now, authorities have already been handing out leaflets in several different languages in the jungle, trying to persuade migrants to leave of their own accord, to take up the French government's offer of being transported to one of some 280 reception centres around France, from where they can legally claim asylum. And they're going to be laying on special buses with that aim in sight. Authorities are hoping around 60 buses, coachloads of people, will leave on this first day of the evacuation. Some 3,000 people taking migrants away from the jungle. That will continue on Tuesday and Wednesday, we're told. And French authorities have set up a special processing site here, just a few hundred metres away from the edge of the jungle, where people's names, where they're from, where they hope to go to, will be taken down in writing. So that's the plan. There could obviously be resistance to that. A lot of people in the jungle didn't want to claim asylum here in France. They came here to Calais because they wanted to cross to the UK. So police are expecting some resistance. The atmosphere here is tense. There have been some clashes with security forces over the weekend at nightfall. There has been extra security laid on for the demolition of the jungle. 1,250 extra police deployed here in Calais as French authorities try and close the Calais jungle once and for all.
Well, as charities warn that the plan to relocate the migrants isn't clear enough, here's more about the planned dismantlement that will start in a few hours.
This is a sprawling migrant camp known as the Jungle in the northern French city of Calais. Monday morning, relocation begins. Residents will gather at this hangar 300 meters away. Outside the building of 3,000 square meters, people will be organized into 4 queues: adults, minors, families, and people who need special assistance. Each will choose their 2 regions of preference before being tagged with a bracelet corresponding to their ultimate destination. Inside, they will be divided into 6 groups before boarding buses that will carry them to their new homes. So-called migrant reception centers spread across the country, the only 2 exceptions being Corsica and Île-de-France. The region surrounding the French capital is already at capacity. France's Interior Ministry has asked prefectures to indicate how many migrants they can receive. And some places are excited to welcome the migrants, like the town of Saint-Brevin, where some residents rallied to show support for their soon-to-be neighbors.
Every commune could easily take in 50 immigrants. That's really not a lot to ask. Here, there are more than 13,000 people. We simply have to be hospitable and provide asylum.
Others do not agree with the relocation plan. One mayor in southern France even stepped down in protest.
We stand behind the mayor and the other municipal officials because we are taking on more than we can handle.
And so while the jungle closes Monday, the controversy surrounding it will continue.
In other world news, battling through booby traps, sniper fire and suicide car bombs, Iraqi forces are slowly tightening the noose around Mosul. But as they struggle to hold on to their gains, military officials warn that the battle to retake the key city from Islamic State group militants will be long and grueling. Well, this Sunday, US Defense Secretary Ash Carter visited Erbil for a closer assessment of the situation, just hours after 10,000 Kurdish Peshmerga forces launched a new dawn offensive on Bashika, northeast of Mosul. Adding to the already complex mix of forces taking part in the operation, Turkey announced it had responded to a request of assistance from the Peshmerga fighters. This despite Baghdad having rejected Ankara's participation on Saturday. Well, James Andre reports from the capital of the Iraqi Kurdistan.
Now, in fact, what's exactly happening this morning, we tried to get into Karakosh. Karakosh was liberated yesterday, and as you said, today it was Bashika's turn. Now, what the Iraqi army is trying to do, we were told this by a general close to Karakosh, is that they're trying to create an arc, an opening towards the city of Mosul, and it was, of course, crucial to liberate Bashika. Now, Bashika has posed fierce resistance. It's been a few days now that indeed we've been told that the Peshmerga forces and Turkish forces were trying to take this city, mainly the Peshmerga on the ground and the Turkish forces using artillery to try and clear the way for them. We were told that they managed to take 8 villages around the city and that they were about to give the final push today. Well, indeed, as you just said, Bashika is now in Peshmerga control. We're also hearing that everything is not cleared in the city. There are still IEDs, there are still pockets of resistance, but this is quite classic. In the hours to come, quite certainly they will manage to secure completely this city. Now, the general was also telling us this morning that in the city of Karakosh, they decided to pause, to stop. The city is only 12 kilometers outside Mosul. They were waiting for reinforcements. That is the 9th Armored Division of the Iraqi army. They already have a lot of hardware there in Karakosh, many tanks, many Hummers. They are getting ready, ramping up in order to be able to give that final ascent on Mosul. According to this general, another piece of information, we were told that they would probably not be waiting for the southern front to be completely opened. If you remember, indeed, from the city of Kayar, the military base of Kayar, there's been a push to the north at the south of Mosul city. Well, there they've been retaking villages. There's still a few dozens of kilometers outside Mosul, and indeed, well, that is going to carry on so they can clear the road to Mosul from the south, but they're not going to be waiting. They're probably going to give the assault in a couple of days or so.
Well, as the battle for Mosul rages on, the UN warns that at least 1 million people could flee the area. But in the refugee centres, NGOs warn they're not ready to manage such an influx. Pascal Davis reports.
These women and children are relieved. After a long, tiresome and dangerous journey from Mosul, they've reached safety in this refugee camp in Iraqi Kurdistan.
When we were being fired at by the Islamic State group, I just tried to protect my children. Thank God nothing happened to them.
And it's the children that are a big concern for aid agencies. This refugee camp south of Mosul sees hundreds of people arrive every day. The charity UNICEF expects over 1 million refugees will come here. Half of them will be children.
These children have been exposed for over 2 years to probably a lot of atrocities, extreme living conditions, and we want to be there for them, to provide them the psychosocial support, to provide them efforts that give them back a normal life as a child.
Although NGOs are preparing for the mass exodus of people from Mosul, the UN's High Commissioner for Refugees admitted on Sunday that finding accommodation for everyone will be a struggle. Without counting
$85.4 billion. That's how much AT&T is putting up to purchase Time Warner and its flagship media assets, making it the biggest corporate merger in the world this year. But the deal has raised concerns among US lawmakers, and even Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton is now calling for regulators to scrutinise the acquisition closely. The US Senate Subcommittee on Antitrust has announced plans to hold a hearing in November. Phoebe Lanza-Wood tells us more about this deal.
It's a blockbuster deal that could shake up the media landscape. American telecommunications company AT&T is set to pay more than $85 billion to acquire Time Warner, giving rise to a new telecom media giant. The aim is to keep up with a shift towards online media. AT&T is a leading phone and internet service provider, while Time Warner is behind some of the world's most popular entertainment. Its subsidiaries include HBO Television and the Warner Brothers movie studio, as well as Time Magazine and CNN. Regulators still need to sign off on the acquisition. Presidential nominee Donald Trump has already said he would block the deal if he wins the upcoming election.
It's too much concentration of power in the hands of too few.
The deal faces intense scrutiny, both because of fears AT&T might try to limit distribution of Time Warner material and because of Time Warner's previous corporate marriages. Its merger with AOL is considered one of the most ill-advised in history. Both Time Warner and AT&T insist there will be no competitive harm to the market. They expect to close the deal by the end of next year.
And the latest to weigh in on this merger is Bernie Sanders. The unsuccessful candidate for the Democratic nomination is calling on Barack Obama to kill the deal, saying it would mean, quote, higher prices and fewer choices for the American people. Chilean voters were called to the polls this Sunday for municipal elections that are seen as a test for the ruling centre-left coalition of Socialist President Michelle Bachelet, this a year before the end of her term. The local polls serve as the unofficial opening of the 2017 campaign season. And Carmen Bachelet, Chile's first woman president, is struggling to deliver on her reform agenda and has been sideswiped by a corruption scandal involving her own son. And in a sign perhaps of the high stakes, Bachelet appeared somewhat absent-minded as she cast her vote in the capital, forgetting her ID in the polling booth and then omitting to sign the register. Well, as polls closed, we spoke to our Santiago correspondent Gideon Long.
Polls closed here just over an hour ago. We don't have any official results so far, so it's difficult to say exactly how the two big coalitions in Chilean politics, the centre-right and the centre-left, have fared. What I can tell you is that anecdotal evidence suggests that the turnout has been very low. At the last local elections in 2012, the turnout was just 42%, and evidence from the polling stations today suggests that it could be as low again, or possibly even lower. In fact, we've just seen some preliminary results from Santiago that suggest that the turnout could have been as low as 20%. If that is the case, that reflects a general disenchantment among Chileans, not just with the centre-left government of Michelle Bachelet, but with the entire political class. And that is because, as you say, there have been corruption scandals in Chile in recent years. Mrs. Bachelet's approval rating stands at just 23%, and the approval ratings for the political parties and for the Congress are lower still. The other thing to bear in mind is that these elections take place against the backdrop of a glitch in the electoral register. Because of a procedural error, around 500,000 people were registered to vote, but in areas where they don't actually live, which meant that they had to travel to vote to different parts of the city in some cases, and sometimes in different parts of the country. We don't yet know what impact that has had on the election result, but it's certainly embarrassing for the Chilean Electoral Commission.
And finally, as Venezuela's constitutional crisis deepens, the opposition-held Congress is now in open rebellion against the government of Socialist President Nicolas Maduro. This Sunday, the legislature has declared that Maduro's, quote, regime committed a coup d'etat when on Thursday authorities blocked a referendum on removing the unpopular leftist leader from power. Well, this Sunday's emergency session was set up to discuss bringing legal charges against the president. But after staging a demonstration outside the building, dozens of red-shirted pro-government activists slipped into the heavily guarded building and marched onto the Congress floor, chanting in support of the socialist government. And with that, we leave this edition. Stay tuned to France 24.
Coming next, sports.
Revisited, presented by Stuart Norval.
Tiny Abkhazia, on the southwestern flank of the Caucasus, has endured 2 wars in the past 25 years. Now, de facto separated from Georgia, it's seeking to rebuild itself. But there are many obstacles in the way: political instability, a multi-ethnic population, and Russia's heavy hand.
Revisited on France 24 and France24.com.